This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. This is episode 232 of the podcast, and we are sitting in the top secret facility of a brewery formerly known as Bokke, now generally known by its shorthand Bokke. But and joining me to talk about brewing are both managing editor Joe Stang on one mic over here.
Hey,
welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Joe has set up this entire Belgium trip, and we appreciate the deep work that he's done to pull this together. And on the other microphone is Raf Souvereyns, the brewer, blender. Actually, you're not a brewer, right?
No,
not yet, at least.
I'm home brewing. That's it so far.
That counts. We count that as brewers.
Sure.
Brewer,
It's all brewing, right? Blender and the man and palate behind the brand. It's a very small operation. It's a small warehouse here in Hasselt.
Yep.
You got your start doing it on a small scale, basically as a home brewer, and have expanded from that into a larger scale blending operation. Currently not making your own wort. You're buying wort from Lambic makers, generally speaking, but also do creative blends with styles outside of Lambic, farmhouse ales, and are doing some genre bending things that are harder to define by classic definition. I'm excited to talk about those kinds of things, some of the techniques that you bring from your experience making wine, and some of those things, especially when it comes to using fruit in beer. We're going to talk about some techniques to, focus on elements of beer that often get overlooked, like texture. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to talk about what the future holds for the brewery right here. Before we do that, what if you could chill your beer with a more efficient chiller? The answer, G&D Chiller's new micro-channel condensers. G&D's micro-channel condensers are highly efficient in hotter regions, use a fraction of the refrigerant over traditional chillers, which provides less opportunity for leaks, along with lower global warming potential. G&D Chiller's engineers are committed to green technology design while developing a more energy-efficient chiller for the brewing industry. Contact G&D Chillers today at gdchillers.com. Also, get back to the future with Weyermann Iceria 1924, made from the oldest German malting barley variety. Iceria shows malty sweet flavor and a soft biscuit-like aroma. This heirloom malt makes amazing traditional Bavarian-style lagers, not to mention modern craft lagers and malt-forward ales. For more info, samples, and orders, please visit go.bsgcraft.com/contact-us. Readers of Craft Beer and Brewing may recognize Bokke, the brand Bokke, because it was Bokke at the time in 2018 when it appeared in the magazine and was one of our beers of the year. It was Piassel, a peach beer that you make with peaches. That trophy somehow has never made it here. We'll figure out and we'll track it down and make sure that it somehow gets here. It got sent back by Belgian Post at one point, and then I think we got it to somebody else to bring it over here, and then of course COVID happened, and man, it's just crazy.
It's either in Ohio or in Massachusetts, but
it's
100%
it's
sure.
In Massachusetts. I can tell you it's in Massachusetts. I do remember that much.
Greg Keane has it.
Yeah,
he has it on his display probably.
Somehow it'll get here, but and then of course there's a breakout brewer from earlier in 2018 when I was able to come out here and visit, and shared plenty about approaches to blending. So if you are a subscriber to the magazine, go dig through those back issues, check it out on the app, and read that story with the fantastic photograph.
Picture, absolutely.
It's fantastic. Channeling Hunter S. Thompson with a cigarette hanging out of your mouth and a gun slung over your shoulder. Yeah. The outlaw blender, Josie Wales. So, Raf, talk to us about your history through beer, through beverages in general, because it isn't just beer. Talk to me about this journey that you've taken in this world of wine and beer to get to where you are here. How'd you catch the bug, and then what did you do to pursue learning around it in order to get to the point where you could start your own professional business blending beer?
So me starting beer, well, of course, as a kid in Belgium, you start drinking beer from the age of 12, but you're just slamming lagers and that's about it.
Sure.
And only got in craft beer actually, well, there's craft beer around everywhere, but I never was too interested in it. It only happened when I was in college. It was in 2000, third year I was there, I think 2006. I met this actually American guy from Iowa, and he gave me, because just 2 weeks ago, a friend from America brought a can for me and gave me a Two-Hearted Ale, which is basically like a supermarket beer in the US these days. But that was the first.
Really good supermarket beer.
Holy shit, that beer is still good, because that beer is fucking old. It's since from the 90s or something it started. And it's just like solid classic beer. And that was the first actual craft beer I had. And first beer that was like, I drank it and I'm like, this is so fucking different from everything else I ever tasted. This is so fucking good. That's what brought me into craft beer.
Bell's Two-Hearted.
Bell's Two-Hearted.
If I had to guess at the answer to that question, that would not be anywhere on the list for that.
Whenever people from the US fly in and ask me, "Oh, do you need something?" It's either Coors Light or Bell's Two-Hearted. But the Coors Light is more of a joke. The Coors Light is a beer that I love drinking in the US. It's not craft beer, of course, but in a lot of places in the US, the tap water tastes like fucking swimming pools. So then Coors Light tastes better than tap water. That's, it's not really
a little bit. Okay. Yeah.
But the Two-Hearted basically got me into craft beer, and from there I started being interested in going to tastings and back in the days checking rate beer and checking the news. There was even like some still like physical magazines out there, and you could discover new breweries or new beers. So that's where the whole thing started. And at the same time, I also had an interest in wine, because my father, my mother too, to a large extent, they're like wine lovers, wine drinkers. And at some point, things just came together by coincidence, basically. So I was helping out. There's in the south of this province, it's Haspengouw. It's like the main fruit producing region in Belgium. Those rolling hills there, and there's a lot of There's several vineyards there. Most winemakers in Belgium are around that region, because you have those nice hills and stuff. And it was through my father initially, and then some other connections. I was just helping with some of those winemakers, just pruning, harvesting, pressing wine, bottling, whatever. Because I was interested in all of those things. At the same time, I was also interested in beer, like drinking craft beer, but I never really felt too much like brewing beer. Because it takes so fucking long. You're just waiting when you're brewing beer, which is ironic, because now I have 3 years to wait for a single barrel to be ready, but I can't wait 2 hours when you're boiling beer because it's boring. But that's how in 2013, like a few things came together. That I was helping with a guy. It's like 25 minutes from here. He was bottling a Chardonnay, the wine, and harvest from the year before, and that was the last time he used certain barrels, and he had one barrel that was, so normal Burgundy barrel is 60 gallons. Oh shit, friend's coming over there. So normal Burgundy barrel is 60 gallons to 28 liters. And he had one of those smaller, like a feuillette they call it, which is a half-size Burgundy barrel, so it's only 30 gallons. We emptied that barrel, we washed it, and then he said, "Here, take the barrel with you." I'm like, "What am I supposed to do with that barrel?" He said, "Well, go fill it with that Lambic beer we're always talking about." I'm like, "All right, I'll give it a shot." So the next day I put the barrel in my trunk. I just drove to Brussels, and I've been to a few of those places before, just to pick up some bottled beer and hang out and to have something at their tap rooms. But that was the first time I had a barrel, and I just went to all those breweries. I'm like, "Yeah, I have this barrel here. Can I fill it, or can you help me to fill it?" And I drove to a few breweries, and everyone poured in some. And at the end of the day, I came back with a barrel of beer, and I was like, "That's a cool fucking story, but what the fuck am I gonna do with that barrel now?" So, and then I was also using my grandma's house. So the year before she moved to an apartment, her house was empty, so I was actually using the cellar. She has a really nice underground cellar there, which is perfect for conditioning beer and wine and stuff. So I was using that place already, and I called her. I'm like, "I have this barrel of beer. Can I put it in your house for a little bit?" She was like, "Yeah, sure." And that's how that barrel ended up in her. We tried to put it over the bathtub, but then it turned and it fell into the bathtub. We just left it sitting in the bathtub. It was sitting there for about a year. And that's how it started. And at some point, there was a friend, whose girlfriend had sour cherries in her garden, or at least her neighbor had, but the tree was so big, there was so much overhanging fruit, which you couldn't legally pick in Belgium. So we just harvested sour cherries and I put it on the beer that was in my barrel, and that's how it all started. That's how a few things just came together randomly, and that first beer turned out complete shit. It was undrinkable.
Yeah.
But I love the process of it. I love doing that whole thing. I never understood what went wrong with that beer. But the year after, I tried it again. And I filled a few more barrels, actually, and that's how it slowly started.
And Lambic makers would just sell you wort.
No,
some guy?
Initially it was Lambic, but mostly, like young-ish Lambic, like a year or slightly younger or older, like young Lambic. Or older Lambic, of course, it's more precious to anyone who's blending or brewing beer. So it's mostly the young Lambic. But I picked it up at breweries and I just put it back into a barrel at home. It was no big deal. You can further age it, depending on there's a few parameters, of course, and you have to take care of oxygen and stuff.
Sure.
But initially, in 2013 and 14. In 12, I also picked up some beer, actually, already. That was before I had my first barrel, and I made a few blends and a few tests. I was actually baking bread with it. I used it as a sourdough starter, basically. But in 2012, 13, and 14, I bought Lambic, mostly young Lambic or a bit older. And then in 15, I started. In 14 also, I bought a little bit of wort, but in 15, I went to only wort. Because it takes some time, of course, too. You're in touch with those people, and they're like, "What the fuck is that guy coming to do?"
Sure.
He lives more, because I'm definitely not from the region. I'm not from Pajottenland or Senne Valley. It's like more than an hour away. But I'll tell them the story. I can get this beautiful fruit in my region because we're known for our fruit and for the beer, and I love your beer, and let's combine those things. It takes some time, of course.
Sure, it's a very relationship focused business, and people want to
exactly.
know you're doing it, doing the right
exactly.
thing and doing it the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Because they also have that, and it's something I always respected. Of course, they have that whole history and tradition. There's so much more than a beer. It's a culture, really, and it's it's in their blood, literally. So you don't have to offend them or anything. Make stupid shit with their beer. So of course, I have my own style of
they are
making
not
beer.
pure capitalists. It is not about selling as much as they can. It is definitely about
Oh yeah, they have sometimes they have like an ethical line which is almost too hard to cross.
Sure,
but
sure.
It's nice. It's really
it
makes you respect them much more, actually, because they. I feel like, for example, we're drinking this beer now, the Girard Gus. That's 4th or 5th generation in the same family doing that thing and making that beer. And they've seen really hard times. They had good times, they had hard times. They've seen everything. So they have that whole history. They take it with them. Paul knows how his father made beer, grandfather. He heard all those stories. So they, it's a whole luggage to have with them. And I don't want to offend them or do anything that I don't like. Of course, I have my own style of making beer. And Paul Girard, for example, he's a good example. That guy, we always had a good relation from the start, actually. He said, "You're a bit crazy in what you're thinking," he says, "but I hope it works." He said, because he doesn't necessarily like all of my beers. That's for sure not the case. He likes very few of my beers. but he respects the way I make beer. And he says it's a very interesting approach, he says, because nobody made Lambic in that way yet. And I hope it works. And I hope you find people are interested in that product. At the same time, I have to say, I have even more respect, of course, to him, to the whole history and everything they do. And they're not going to do much crazy shit, it's not in their genes.
Sure, nor do they need to, because they're making a beautiful product as it is.
That solid product. I mean, we're drinking the regular black label goose right now here. This beer is so good. Why would you change it?
Sure.
Never change a winning team. And this beer has probably been the same for the last decades. I don't know. I wasn't there. But this beer is, this is one of the lambics also. I use it for more into lambic and everything. But this beer and the way you taste this coming from that brewery, this beer creates a stage in which you can do a million different things. This beer is so solid, so beautiful. It's my go-to goose. It's the only beer I ever drink alone. I never drink when I'm alone.
Yeah.
Because
if
you make beer, it's very risky if you start drinking alone.
Sure.
Doorstep to alcoholism is right there. Only Girard, I can really sit in the sofa in the evening, and it will take me all evening to finish a bottle, but I'll enjoy every sip of it. And if I can't finish it on one night, no problem. The next day it tastes even better.
Really?
The
Yeah.
benefits if the excess carbonation is gone, it gets slight oxidation. No, that beer is incredibly amazing.
So you build some relationships and you start buying wort from Lambic brewers and blenders.
Yes.
And you bring it back here. You're about an hour east of Brussels.
Yes.
It's not, like you said, it's not the traditional Lambic brewing region. It's not. And so you couldn't necessarily brew spontaneous beer here and call it Lambic without upsetting some people. That's a whole other issue. We won't get into that. But you start making beer and aging it here in your own barrels. How did that, when did you decide, hey, I need to now do this at a certain kind of volume with a certain kind of output in order to support this, and then, rent a warehouse and actually become a professional at this?
I initially didn't have a plan, actually.
Yeah.
In 2014, I made it official. So I already had a business, a VAT number, a business license, all those things. I had those already, and I just extended it to, because officially it's a brewery. I don't brew beer, but officially it's not. Blendery is not a thing officially, so it's a brewery.
You do ferment, so yeah.
Yeah, it's a brewery. A ferment wort, grain-based wort, which makes you a brewery.
You turn it into alcohol, and that makes you a brewery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So from 2014, my VAT number includes being a brewery. But honestly, back then I still had my main job too, and I was just working during the day, and in the evening, at night, and the weekends I was making beer. I never had any plans with it. I thought it was a fun hobby, and so you're creating alcohol, and then you can also deduct it from your taxes, which is even better. So I said, okay, let's turn it into a business. We'll see. Of course, at some point you if you have more than 5 or 10 barrels, you have to become a serious alcoholic, or you have to indeed have a sort of commercial plan or a way to commercialize the beer. But I basically, I was 28, 29 at that moment. That's the moment where everyone buys a house and buy their first BMW, all that shit. I bought barrels. So, you put it into bricks or something like a thing on 4 wheels or whatever, and I put it into barrels, and, I was fine with that. I was like, I'm not planning to have a family anytime soon yet. And I just invested my money in that. And, if you're throwing it away at a fucking BMW or barrels, well, I'd rather buy barrels because, so that's how it started, but I didn't have a plan actually. Yet at the same time, and it was in late 2015, I had too many barrels to drink them and share them with all my friends. So, and I was actually producing beer, so I had small batches of this and that beers. I actually went to drink shops here in Belgium and some bars, some craft beer bars. But nobody was interested in the best response you got. Well, there was 2 responses. Either, yeah, it's interesting, which means shit. And the other one, yeah, it's not bad for a home brew. Fair enough. Nobody wanted to pay anything for it, really. And suddenly it all changed when it was December 15. I got an invite for MBCC, the Mikkeller Beer Celebration Copenhagen, and that's where in May 16 we were invited to that festival, and then the whole thing. That's where it started properly. And then later on the next year, I won that award from Raid Beer in 17. It was, I think, and then the whole thing exploded. And then I ran, in 2016 when that whole thing started going crazy. I immediately rented this warehouse because it was. I was doing this whole thing from grandma's house still.
Right.
And the house was, at some point, was so full of barrels and stuff that the last barrels of wort we filled that season, last 3 or 4 we put in the garden because there was no space. But we put them under some trees and under some shrubs, and we put some crap on top of it to insulate them. Those barrels were sitting in the garden for more than half a year. The beer was totally fine.
Huh.
Yeah. So but the house, I was just running out of space in that house, and it was also the thing is officially I was making beer at a local winery. We signed some paperwork to make sure that officially everything was sound and safe, because it was absolutely not legal to run a business from that house or to produce alcohol there.
Yeah.
But that's how it grew naturally, and then at some point in 16 and in 15. I was like, let's stop doing this. I'm going to sell some of the beer to friends, and then I'm going to, decrease the amount of barrels I have, and it's going to be a nice hobby, but I can never turn it into a business. And then when the whole thing with Copenhagen happened then I was like, all right, I'm going to rent a warehouse and we're going to do this properly now.
One festival invite changed the entire direction.
Changed everything. It
Wow.
was crazy. Yeah. It was absolutely nuts.
So then you scaled.
Yeah.
And in fact, let's talk a little bit more about this, because then this story takes a wild turn last year. And it's something that we have to talk about. Before we do that, is your brewery struggling to source or afford berry ingredients? Historic heat waves devastated U.S. berry crops, causing supply to dwindle and prices to skyrocket. That's why brewers are switching over to Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends, which mimic straight concentrates, but at a better price point and with a more reliable supply. Is it any surprise that Old Orchard's best sellers are raspberry and blackberry flavors? Reclaim your margins and order your craft concentrates at oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, Brew Monitor from Precision Fermentation is the first real-time comprehensive fermentation monitoring solution. It works with your existing fermentation tanks to track dissolved oxygen, pH, gravity, pressure, temperature, and conductivity in real time from any smartphone, tablet, or PC. Brew Monitor provides detailed insight into your fermentations that helps improve beer consistency, reduce tank time, and increase overall efficiency, saving your brewery time and money. Get started for 30 days risk-free. Visit precisionfermentation.com/brewing. So you scale this, you decide to go pro with this, that there's enough excitement, buzz, demand for what you do, to kick off and actually turn this into a business. I imagine even at that time, you're still not quite ready to quit your real job with an actual income. You just decide you're gonna have to do more work on the side to do this. What was that next? How many barrels did you then start filling? And, how did you also decide to, what was going to be the brand? Because Bokke has, there's an expectation around it now, but when it didn't exist, how did you decide what we're going to be known for and how I'm going to make that happen?
I had no idea. I just, no,
Okay, sure.
no, I had a lot of ideas, but no, I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have it written down, but it's just, everything happened in a natural,
Right.
organic way. It's just that at some point you see, all right, I know this, I know how to do that, I know a bit of this, but it's it's a complete shit show.
Yeah.
But then at some point you start connecting all the dots, and that's actually what happened. Is that I started connecting dot by dot with a few things. I like doing, one day I'm going to retire from making beer. I'm just going to do woodworking because I love woodworking. Of course, I'm working with barrels, and that's also kind of woodworking. So that's also a thing I love doing. So suddenly everything came together, and then the whole thing with making fruit beer. As a child, I grew up at a factory. My father was running a factory. Actually, we had a really big garden too, and there was cherry trees. What else? And there was some bushes with red currants, black currants. We had some fruits in the garden. My grandparents, they had cherries, peaches, a bit of everything too. So that's where I had that connection with fruit. I had connection with those ones. Just everything came together. There was never really a plan. But at some point, of course, you have to move on. At some point, I had over 30 barrels of beer sitting there. And I was actually producing beer on a very, very tiny scale, but fair enough, it was just way too much to drink by myself. It became very clear at some point.
Sure.
It just evolved,
Yeah.
It was never intended. It's still, I still can't believe it. 7 years later, I'm still doing this thing.
Sure.
As your name got out there and people started to know about you a little bit, did it get harder to get the Lambic that you wanted or the wort that you wanted? And then you also developed a relationship with Girardin too. And how did that develop?
The one with Girardin I've developed in a very good way, of course. They liked the success I was building and the name I was building for myself, and they also appreciate it very much that I didn't use their name. Of course, when people ask, where do you get the beer from? Well, I said, I get it from Girardin de Trog Lindemans. With the Trog also, from the start, I had a very good relationship with Lindemans too. Some up and down, some few bumps in the road, but it's fine. They're cool with what I do. I also expanded 2 years ago to Den Herberg. Became a new producer, and right when they started producing Lambic, I contacted them and said, "Can I buy a wort?" And they were cool with that too. So, you just, because that's another thing that's happening in the last 2 years at least now, is there's a lot of home blenders who are doing what I was doing 7-8 years ago in my grandma's house, and it's fantastic if that happens, because back in the days, if you look at 100 years ago, there were hundreds of blenders everywhere. Pretty much every bar in and around Brussels was a blender, because they had barrels of Lambic and they blended their own stuff, or they served it. They did whatever the fuck they wanted. So it's nice if that part of the culture is coming back. But it's not nice that people start producing beer and they put on the label, oh, this beer contains girardin, and then they put like a little splash of Cantillon in it too, because that looks very good on the label. With all respect to Cantillon, it's very good beer indeed. But people start like showing off with other breweries' names on their homebrew labels, which is like you're basically trying to use someone else's success to build your own thing, and it's you got to build your own thing. It's very hard, of course, to make your own name, and but then again, you just focus on making the beer, because there's some of those homelanders. They spend so much time on their fucking Instagram accounts. If they spent that much time on their beer would taste a whole lot better. They should rather do that, because it's really, the beer world, and it's every business is like that. It's marketing. But some breweries are just about marketing. A good name you built for yourself, and it takes time. And it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of very good product, and then the name will get out there, and people will recognize that as a sign of quality, and okay, this guy makes good beer, and generally that's not always perfect.
Sure.
Lambic is the most flawed beer there is, so that's the beauty of Lambic.
We'll come back to that question, because I'm curious what you mean by that. But as you grew this, you were still small. Even though you had 30 barrels. You're probably 2 or 3 times that now.
About that.
Yeah, and still not a humongous amount of beer. It's still a very small thing, and it's still sold in very small amounts through specific accounts. You don't have a tap room. There's no place for people to come and just buy it directly from you. You tend to work with partners even now to sell it, and it's grown in that very small but intentional way to and everything. At various points of this, it has been just you, and then sometimes it was up to 2 additional staff people, and now it's back to just you again. Let's talk about last year. You start with this small strategy, and it's an interesting one because you are the creative mind behind the brand, and every beer that you release is blended by you. There's not other staff people here that do the creative work. You're an integral piece of this. There's no Bokke writer without Raf. And then last year you had some health stuff that just took you out completely.
Yep, exactly. Last year from March, April, I was sick, and at some point I just had to stop working, and I developed a lot of small things, and muscle pain, and then being sore and this and that, to like extreme severe arthritis where you just, all your joints are just inflammation, and then you just can't move anymore. So
you were physically unable to do the brewery work.
Yes, physically I was not able to work. At some point we did we only just started bottling actually for that season, and it was only the second bottling. A friend of mine was there to help me, and at some point I could barely lift it. So I'm always doing the fillings. I put the bottles under the filler. I could barely lift the bottle. I could barely hold it anymore. My hands hurt so much. And at some point, a screwdriver fell, and I was simply not able to pick it up. My friend told me, "You have to stop working, man. You're sick." I said, "I'm really fucking sick. I'm going to stop working." As much as I love the beer, because fuck me, I love beer so much.
Sure.
And I missed it because I didn't work for a half year. And it fucking hurt also, in the next few months. I was going from doctor to doctor, and they were trying to figure out what I had. And everyone had an opinion, but nobody had a fucking clue, actually. And every time I came here, it fucking hurt, because I had beer sitting in tanks that were ready to go into bottling, At some point, beer is finished, and from there, it just goes to hell. It either oxidizes or acidifies. That's Lambic. At the end of the stage, it goes fucking wrong. And some of those beers, sadly, they had to be dumped. But it really hurt. But then again, I was physically not able to work.
It adds that you're dealing with physical pain, and then you're dealing with the emotional pain, and then the financial pain on top of that. Of them.
Financially, it was a disaster. It was absolute. Because actually, it was just a half year before that happened. I finally paid off the last loans I had, So it's literally one, like back then the statute of the business was literally a one person business, and I had some private loans to get the whole thing started. But I'm the only owner of this place, obviously, and I paid off the last loans, and I was like, yeah, I'm finally financially independent. I can start investing more actually because I have some more beer to sell and everything. I was like so relieved, and then disaster strikes, and then you can get more loans than ever to keep the thing afloat because I was sick, I was not producing beer. I was not selling beer because we barely bottled any beer, but I have to pay the rent. I have to pay our taxes. I have to pay this and that. So everything, it just keeps going. So financially, it was also very hard. But yeah, I don't know. I just borrowed more money.
Wow.
I'm planning to go down. Yeah.
So just 2 releases then for the entire year of 2021, or 2 bottlings?
Well, both of them are still in quarantine. The beers are shit. So you can taste. No, seriously, in those beers you can easily taste. And some of them most of them will be destroyed, but I'm gonna keep some cases of that beer because it's a very good case. I tasted it with Uli, the German home blender, last week, and he said you can taste in the beer that it's yours, and at the same time it's absolutely not yours. He said I can taste in this beer that you're sick or something is wrong with you. He said because it's not blended like you blend beers. He said it is your style, and at the same time it's very atypical for your style. It's not a finished beer. It's not a good beer. He said this is, some other that can be released that beer, but it's not the quality standard I want to offer. So those beers, both of those batches will never be released.
I can't imagine being a brewery blendery and not being able to release beer for an entire year.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, it still hurts now because also now, bars and restaurants are running out. Last year in September, October, I think I took all the stock I still had, and everyone ordered. And I'm like, all right, guys, I'm just gonna divide it evenly for all of you. And that's it. And you have to wait until next year, summer. And yeah, that's what it is. It's just right now. It's just me alone, and I'm try to keep it like that. It's a small business, and I also intentionally kept it at like we make 100 hectoliters a year, which is like 14,000 bottles maximum, and that's going to be it. That's it. That's all I can do because I work with fresh fruits. I work with these local farmers far away too. I get passion fruit from Sicily, and some fun stuff too. But like the amount of work that gets into it, like. Considering the timing of the harvest and everything, and the varieties, the blends of varieties I use and everything, so much physical work and so much work that gets into it. It's enough, and I can live from making that small amount of beer, hopefully. So, but I just want to keep that quality standard. That's always been the thing. Like I want to make quality beer. Yeah, I like that.
So Lambic in particular is a very seasonal brew process.
Yeah.
Brews over the winter when the temperature is cold enough for traditional Lambic to spontaneously inoculate. And so there's not a point where even if things go south, like if you're going to kick up for the next season, you need to be there to get wort, because you're not making your own, you have to be there to get it when it's ready and to put it into barrels. That didn't happen until what, like December of last year?
No, it didn't happen last year.
This year.
Sorry?
So when did you start pulling wort back in and getting back into the production process?
Because of my whole production process, I always get the wort very late in the season. I usually get it in March, April, May. That's like the end of the season. But I like that because temperatures increase and you got in my opinion, much better inoculation of the beer and the cool ship and everything. The beer starts fermenting on us like immediately, and you get a much healthier fermentation. I usually get end of season lambing, and last year nothing happened. Only the Troch came in, and we put it in those big totes for shipping, and that beer never, until 3 months ago, was, it's very embarrassing to say, but it's the truth. Until 3 months ago, that beer was still sitting in those totes.
Wow.
So the wort was sitting, and the wort started fermenting, and there was 8 totes sitting here, and 3 months ago we went through it, and 3 of them were dumped immediately because the totes were also sitting open, and 5 of them, I put in barrels, and that's the only wort I got last year was a little bit of the Troch. Lindemans never came in, and Gira. So Paul knew I was sick, and I'm quite close to those people. I absolutely love them. They're the finest people in the beer industry for me. And Paul at some point he said, I think it's better for you take it easy, take care of your health. I'm going to brew your beer. I'm going to store it in my barrels in my warehouse, and you pick it up whenever you feel better.
Wow.
So I already picked up quite a bit, and I'm picking up 1,000 or 2,000 liters at a time. But it was so nice of him to actually brew the beer for me and keep it in his barrels. And it's just that's when you we're not just colleagues, those people also care about me and they want to help me and they want to keep, because there's also a certain, there's a, what's the English word for it? Like a whole sequence of things in your whole production process on Lambic. You cannot, if you miss out a whole season, well, your whole production schedule is fucked up, basically.
Right.
So, and it's still kind of disrupted, but that's fine, I'll fix it. So
now you're back at work. You're working again. In your blendery.
Yeah.
And you had probably more time than you would have wanted to think about the business and where it might go. How has the last year changed the way you look at your work? Has it changed what your plans are for it, and maybe even just your day-to-day outlook?
So last year, the 16th of the 16th of July, I ended up in the hospital. I had to stay there for 3 weeks. And the 20th of July, I literally thought I was going to die. It does make you think about life, I'll tell you that. And a few things change in your life. and so one of the things for sure, I had to, still not very well known what I have, and I'm still figuring out stuff, but I have a very good clue of why that whole thing came together, because the years before that I was non-stop working, always smoking cigarettes. That one interview you once did on the picture, I'm there with a cigarette, of course. Very unhealthy living, working a lot at night and working like extreme hours and all of those things. At some point was it necessary? No, but you have that, I just always wanted to make beer, and I just wanted to push it forward and develop those things, and it's all good, because it made, at the end of the day, it made really good beer, I think. But at the end of the day, I was killing myself. I was destroying my whole body by living in such a way. So that definitely had to change. I had to definitely like very drastically change my lifestyle. Eat much healthier, have better sleep and everything. But so in one way, I'm actually spending less time here at the warehouse now making beer. But I think the quality of my work is way better. Because also one of the things also that changed last year is that I finally got, after so many years, a labeling machine. Before that, we stuck all the labels by hand, which makes you go mental. I bought an automatic corker, automatic capper. Before, it was all manual work. Well, that's a semi-automatic corker. There was always a stress of like finding enough people to come over to help, and to get so much stress and everything. So I started buying some machines for the parts of the process where my hands don't make the difference. Like if my hands put the cork in the bottle or a machine, or a monk who does that, it doesn't make a difference. The beer is just the same. So for a lot of the steps in the process where my hands make no difference, I'm buying machines and stuff to help me, because also I've completely fucked up my back in the last several years. That was actually mostly in grandma's house, and then 4 years ago I got a forklift. Before that I was going to like a phase also where the doctor told me, if you're going to keep working like this, make sure you can get your retirement in 2 years, because your whole back will be ruined.
Oh.
When people say that, this makes you think. And I had the same discussion last summer with the doctors. They're like, the way you live, it's not very healthy. You don't need to go to school for 10 years to understand that cigarettes are not very healthy. So, I'm not going to say I'm never going to smoke a cigarette anymore, but it makes you think. And I think in the way I work in a different way. And I think I work less, but way better quality, and I can focus more on putting out a more than ever high quality product. And also it gave me the time, actually, because I rarely had time in the last 2 years to stand still and look at what we have and look what's going on and evaluate things. And last year I was sick for months in a row, so I had plenty of time to evaluate the last 5 years. And it's also interesting that I started writing down a lot of things and combining things. And again, the same thing as so many years before, connecting the dots again. Like, see, where am I at? What still has to happen? What have we learned from that? And again, making that puzzle and make it look. Try to see if it still fits in a way or not. If it doesn't fit, you better make it fit. But it was an interesting process of standing still, looking at things, evaluating things, and trying to find a way to, keep going, but in a healthier, better way. Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about, let's pivot and talk about some technique, because I think, as devastating as that is, the demand for what you do remains strong. You took it. In fact, having that year of not releasing beer.
I forgot one thing, because maybe like ask your question. Talking about technique, like last August, July, I went to hospital. Early August, I could leave the hospital. I was a complete wreck. I lost more than 40 pounds. I was like, holy shit. And it took me a while to literally get back on my feet. And I was actually not planning to make any beer last year. Because I missed the summer fruit harvest for sure, and then in September, October, you still have some grapes, you have some vineyard peaches, and then it's finished. So I missed almost everything already. And then in September, I actually went to some winemakers I know just to hang out. They were like, "Oh, what the fuck's happening to you?" Because they didn't hear from me, and I didn't place an order and stuff. So I just went by and said hi, and that's it. And actually, it's like this year, because of the rainfall we had last summer in Belgium was crazy. We had the biggest floods ever, I think. Here, it was a very difficult season for grape growers or winemakers, whatever, grape farmers. And I was talking to Matthias. He's in Mosel. He makes Riesling, and he says it's an interesting season because it's very, very difficult. He says, but this season will show who has technical capacity to make wine, because those people can make wine. It's going to be down the road in these few years in the bottle and barrels and everything. So it's not going to be an easy season for sure, but it can make wine that's absolutely spectacular. But you need technical knowledge. You need to be there, and you need to know how to make wine right now. And I'm like, well, I don't know shit about wine making, but I'm going to fucking try it with beer. For me, it sparked physically, I needed a lot of help, and I could count on so many friends and customers, and people just came over here to help all the physical work, because physically I was still not able to. But I tried again to connect those dots with all of the stuff I learned and all the technical aspects of winemaking, beer making, and all the processes. And I tried to put a puzzle together, a difficult season. I talked to the winemakers, like, how does your process change now compared to last year in terms of when do you harvest, how the whole, when do you press, so how long do you macerate, how long do you clarify, all of the technical aspects. And man, I was like, fuck, now I'm going to try something, because I'm actually not yet ready to do it. But I learned a lot of things down the road, and this is a very interesting year to put all that knowledge together and try to make something good out of it. So, yeah, sorry.
No, let's talk about some of those things. Let's talk about some of those ways that you use fruit, and especially some of the things that have developed, and maybe even some of the ways that you've reconsidered methods and helped improve those. Before we do that, from the rotatable pickup tube on Rogue Brewing's Pilot Brewhouse to the integrated hopbacks on Sierra Nevada's twin prototyping brewhouses, SS Brewtech has taken technology they invented working with world-renowned industry veterans and made them available to every craft brewer. To learn more about SS Brewtech's innovation list, head over to ssbrewtech.com. Also, are you looking for the tools to make your next improvements in process and quality control? The InPro 8630i from Mettler Toledo is the ideal sensor for combined color and turbidity measurements in loudering, filtration, and phase shift operations. Robust, compact, and easy to handle, it supports consistency in beer processing. The InTap portable oxygen meter gives you readings wherever you need them. Flexible in production for verification while purging or for troubleshooting, it's your perfect helping hand. Contact Mettler Toledo today to find out more. Let's talk about some of those ways that over the last year you may have. Well, first let's talk about just the way that you think about fruit, the way that you select fruit, the way that you choose fruit to use, and how you think about the flavor of fruits and evaluate the flavor of those fruits. Because there's a lot, you've put a lot into the beer before you ever put it onto fruit, and you can't lose beer. It needs to work, and you need your ability to take that kind of crazy risk. You want to mitigate that as much as you can in order to so you have to have a good idea about how these flavors are going to work and how that's going to go. Talk to me then again how you make that kind of selection and find fruit to use and make decisions about which ones.
Oh, I cannot answer that in one sentence, that's for sure.
Perfect.
it's a lot about tasting, of course, by going around talking to people, tasting. Also doing research into old varieties of fruits, because those are mostly 90% of the time, the old varieties are the most interesting, because these days, it's about the 60s when you see that the whole, everything started to be properly industrialized. The fruit industry, the fruit and vegetable fresh produce industry started becoming extremely industrialized, homogenized, standardized, all those things. And regarding fruit, so I love making fruit beers. Where that whole thing started is because I previously told that as a child we had fruit in the garden and we made jams and stuff, and also my grandmother actually put sour cherries on gin, like locally produced gin, which is like very old Geneva, we call it in Belgium. It's like Geneva is actually the mother of gin, of what we call gin these days. It's less spiced or differently spiced with juniper berries. Anyway, my grandma used to make those things. So that's where my fascination for fresh fruit comes from, because every summer when we had those fruits in the garden, it was just celebration. I love picking fruits, of course.
Sure.
And now for making beer, I was talking about like in the 60s when everything started like becoming industrialized. People always did that, of course. They started grafting fruits like how do you call it? What's the English word for it? Veredelen. I've got to look up that word.
But I can see what you're saying. It became more about what the fruit looked like than what the fruit tasted like.
Yeah, exactly. So for commercial production of fruit, there's like a checklist, and there's the way fruit looks, the transportability, the sweetness, because people love sugar.
Right.
That's the whole, we call it the Coca-Cola revolution, basically, which started. My grandma, she can tell you about that. Like before World War II, they ate fermented foods and sour foods, sour beverage and everything, and then suddenly everything was sweet. That was a new thing. She said we fucking loved it. she literally remembers tanks driving into her village and those dudes handed out Coca-Cola. Well, you'll fucking love anything they give to you, because finally, the whole war was over and everything, so people had to celebrate. That's where that whole, suddenly, boom, there was that sweet beverage, and it's nothing wrong with Coca-Cola. Well, but that's where the whole sweetening basically started, and people wanted sweet stuff. And that also translated to the fruit industry, of course, where varieties were selected for sweetness, transportability, what do you call it, shelf life. And at the bottom of the list, or not even on the list anymore, there's taste. And that's not a factor in why people have certain varieties of fruit, and that's sad, because taste is everything, and also acidity is something people don't want. They just want the high sweetness, high sugar levels. If you go to like a fruit market, like where they import exotic fruits and stuff like that, if you ask about the quality of a certain imported fruit, like an exotic fruit, they give you, as a sign of quality, to tell you how many degrees Brix the fruit has, which means how much sugar is in the fruit.
Right.
I'm like, no, does it taste good? Yeah, it has like 20 Brix. I'm like, no, does it taste good? So literally, they think sugar is taste. And in general, it's true. You can still please. It's slowly changing that people are back interested again in like fermented and slightly sour foods and everything, because also it's more healthy. But yeah, so a lot of those like commercially available fruits, you can't do shit with them, because you've put them on beer. Sugar will all disappear. It will all get fermented into alcohol. And if there is no acidity in the fruit and no flavor, well, you have nothing left. You just make ethanol. You can just as well put potatoes on beer then, because they have no taste really. And there's also sugar in them in a way.
So you've been trying to hunt down growers that are growing heirloom varieties of these fruits, and because they just taste better and they can contribute in a more meaningful way into the beer.
Heirloom, that's the word in English. It's a beautiful word. Indeed, that's what I try to do. Yeah. Because those old varieties have more taste. The sugar disappears. It's just all the sugar is kind of irrelevant. It's also relevant because there's like way too much sugar in the fruit. You make so much alcohol that it's very hard to balance a beer. So actually, high sugar content is usually against what I do. It's not beneficial for my production. But if for example, like here in Haspengo, you have like apple production. Basically, every apple you eat in Belgium, 80%, let's say, is produced here. And there's a variety called Jonagold. It's an apple that tastes like absolutely nothing. It's like a candy. Yeah, it's sweet. It's a sugar bomb. And if you ferment it into a cider or anything, it tastes like literally like nothing. Like you cannot recognize that it once was an apple. Regarding taste, in a blind tasting, you don't say it's apple because that apple has zero flavor, just sugar. So how can you make a beer with that? Well, you can try really hard, but you can't.
Right.
And those heirloom varieties, it's also those. You meet the most interesting people, really, and some people that are retired since. There was Bokke. Bokke he's 80 something, like 82, I think he is. He actually he worked in fruit his whole life. And he was there before everything became industrialized, and he saw the whole change of the industry, and he also saw the good varieties just disappearing. And that guy actually, more than 30, 40 years ago, he lives in the part of the fruit region too, and he has this big backyard. Like that's his private property, basically, his house, his garden. And in his garden, he started already decades ago collecting the varieties that were disappearing.
Huh.
So he basically built a library of trees in his garden. And the guy has the old varieties, and I buy his whole garden every year. And we're actually expanding. Like his son, of course, he's getting a bit old. He still loves it. So I met him 3 years ago. I don't know. I went to pick up something somewhere, and I was driving. It's like in the middle of the country, It's like in those fields and stuff. There's no reason why you would go there. So I just saw by coincidence. I saw this sign on the street for sale peaches and raspberries. Oh no, I'm gonna pull over. Whenever I see a sign like that, you got me. I'm sold. And I talked to this guy, and I told him what I'm doing. He's like, I think you're crazy. I think, yeah, fully agree, but I want your fruit. and then we talked a bit, and I started buying some fruits, and I ate some test batches. And next year I'm back. I said, dude, what do you normally do with the fruit? So Bokke, 82 years old. So during the season, he had a lot of peaches, and he's one of the very few people who still has a decent-ish amount of peaches in his garden. So the guy has to wake up, he has to pick them the day before. Next morning, he has to wake up at 3:30 to go to the fresh market. And it's basically like an auction house, where it's day price, basically. So it's just demand and offer. And so the guy had to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to be there by 5 in the morning to sell his peaches for a price that's competitive with peaches, with all due respect, from like industrial produced peaches from Spain, which taste like absolute crap. There's no quality to those peaches. But he had to sell them for a competitive price with those peaches. It's good for that guy that it was a hobby because it didn't even cover his costs. It was ridiculous. And he felt sad because he also went to some local fresh market just literally on the street, and he could get them sold there to people of his generation, because those people know that's the quality fruit. And that guy sells fruit with flavor. We have to eat it fast though, because the shelf life of a few days.
Right.
And the guy was like, he's like, I just do it for a hobby and I like doing it, but it's madness. And I said, dude, here's a prepayment. And I said, I'm going to pay you a fair price because this is absolutely absurd. And I was so happy, and I was happy too. I'm happy to find that guy. And then he came here to visit, and then he saw, like, when you were here in 2018, when you still had that long stack of barrels, he was like, oh my God. And then he called his wife, you cannot believe what I'm looking at now. He was so excited. He said, yeah, and I could see the fruit, and it's bubbling in the beer, and tastes kind of weird, but I like it. It's the most interesting people you meet in that way.
Sure.
And his son now is planting some more of like some heirloom varieties of peaches at some other field, the vineyard peaches of the Piassel. The vineyard peaches is a very old variety of red peaches, red flesh peaches. It's kind of sour, sweet sour from Mosel area. I have 170 trees, which is not that much, but they're here locally now with a local farmer in Belgium. And here and there I have small projects to find those heirloom varieties and to reintroduce them. Just last year, a year and a half ago, I went to France to like a nursery, called like a plant nursery, tree nursery.
Yeah.
To pick up like a heirloom variety of Belgian apricots from the 1800s, mid 1800s. It's impossible to find them in Belgium. And at the nursery in France, in the north of France, I could get them. And those apricots are, they're made for this climate because they come from this climate.
Right.
We have like all the humidity issues and stuff like that. So it's really exciting to reintroduce those varieties. It's crazy. Because also you see that some of them, not all of them, a lot of them you can grow organically, because they're actually resistant against a lot of things. And a lot of the modern varieties, they take so much fucking care. And you need to be out there with chemicals almost every day to protect your plants. Well, come on, what are we doing? Like, we're poisoning our fields, we're poisoning ourselves. We also have to that's on a bigger scale, of course. It's way beyond me, but we have to rethink how we produce our food. We are poisoning ourselves completely. We're eating ourselves to death, literally. I mean, I've been reading and studying a lot about these things because I was sick last year. And it's an autoinflammatory disease, I supposedly have. They're not even sure. But I mean, if you look how much that is related to the food we eat, and if you then look at how we produce the food we put in our mouths, we can talk for a whole day about that. Sure. We're talking beer here.
But you are going at it a different way, buying locally, not getting, fruit that's covered in preservatives, getting, fruit with lower sugar content, fruit with more flavor, and then processing it quickly. I remember when I came here in 2018, you're like, I got cherries this morning and they've got to go in beer today.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And that was, it's like, well, I don't have time to talk until all of the fruit is on the beer. And, when I showed up, you had volunteers and it was packing cherries into barrels with beer. And that was going to be the thing. When you get the call from the grower that these are ready, there's no waiting. There's no, it is now it's go time.
No, if you wait, you lose. Also, because that's the thing too with those heirloom varieties, like the vineyard peaches, for example, they're the best example. You can literally keep them for 1 day. That's it. Shelf life 1 day.
Wow.
After that, they start like browning and collapsing, and the fruit is done. Like if you open it, it's not red anymore; it's brown. So shelf life is extremely short. So that's typical. Well, it's not a good thing, but it's what it is.
Yeah.
So you have to start fermenting it, and either you can also ferment the fruit by itself if you add some salt to it. Literally, you can preserve the fruit because the fruit starts fermenting inside the skin.
Right.
But it will not get rotten. But you have to use those fruits, and then that's in the past. It was all these days like a lot of if you buy apples, for example, sometimes you can keep an apple on the shelf for a half year and it doesn't fucking change. Do you want to put that in your body? It's your choice. Everyone has the right to poison themselves.
So you get, say, something like a red vineyard peach. What does your process look like to prepare that and put it into beer?
The vineyard peaches.
Yeah.
We picked them and we put them in beer.
Do you cut them? Do you puree them?
We cut
do you
them.
Slice them up? Do you use pits?
We squeeze them literally because we use the whole fruit. And 2 years ago, I actually bought a machine that really very much helps us. But we used to do it all by hand, which is just crazy. It makes your hands. I mean, you get arthritis if you do that.
Oh, yeah.
So we basically squeeze the fruit and then throw it in whole, like with the stone and everything. Because I think that, if you look at stone fruits have, for me, they have 3 main flavors. One is the skin, of course. There's a lot of oils in the skin, a lot of perfume and everything. Then you have the flesh. In the case of the vineyard peach, it gives just the typical peachy flavor, but in the skin, you get like that aromatic quality, that perfumey quality, a little bit of like a plum strawberry perfume comes from the skin. And in the flesh, you have typical peach aroma and peach taste. And from the pit, you get a little spiciness, that almond character too. And in most pits of stone fruits, there's a component called benzaldehyde, which exactly is almond aroma. That's also what you taste if you taste an almond. If you taste a bitter almond from California, that tastes like almonds because that has the highest load of benzaldehyde.
Okay.
And in peach pits, apricot pits, it's less to a lesser extent. But the thing is, like, you have those 3 flavors in a fruit. Because you see a lot of brewers, they open the fruit, they throw away the stones. Because to an extent, the stones are toxic. That is true. There's not just benzaldehyde. There's also precursors to cyanide.
Right.
That's not very healthy. But it's all, at some point that was in 2015. Actually, I made a test and we were actually separating the stones from the vineyard peaches, and I filled a whole bucket, like a 30-liter bucket. It's about 8 gallons. I mean, more or less 8 gallons. I filled an entire bucket, only pits, only stones from peaches, and then at the end of the day, I filled it with beer. Just I covered all pits in beer, and that was it. I let it sit for 3 months. And what came out of that was sour amaretto. Literally, it was pure almond taste.
Huh.
Lambic with almond taste, like very intense almond taste. And then, of course, there was the question, like, is this going to kill us if we drink a glass?
Did you get it tested for cyanide?
If you have to believe people, that thing will instantly kill you, especially when you talk to American brewers. Because, Americans are afraid of everything, so it's easy to scare. I'm sorry.
Hey,
cut this out if you want.
I've got thick skin. I can take it.
No, but and then I had the luck too. At that moment, a friend of mine, she was working in a pharmaceutical lab right next to the toxicology lab at the University of Leuven, and sometimes I could give her samples for analysis of this and that. And I actually had a sample of that put in to check for cyanide.
Right.
And yes, it definitely did contain cyanide, but man, you would be dead from the ethanol way before the cyanide would get you. So
the concentration was so low.
The concentration was absurdly low.
Yeah.
It's just that the benzaldehyde is that aroma that gives that almond flavor. So I was like, all right, this is fine. Because also at some point, it was 3 years ago, a beer. So that's the noyau, basically. The noyau means the pit flavor. So I made the beer called Framboos Noyau, Piasson Noyau, where I take framboos and I put that apricot stones. Then, because apricot stones they contain more benzaldehyde than peach stones. So I use apricot stones. Infusion in Lambic, and then I added to the raspberry beer to make it so much softer and smoother. When I first exported those beers to the US, actually the FDA needed a few samples because of the ingredients listed.
Right.
Because it might, there might be a health hazard. Fair enough. I love those things. Those agencies are there for a good reason. So they got tested and they were completely fine. So, yeah. There's sometimes you do things and you really have to get. Same thing with peach leaves, for example. The leaves of a peach tree is absolutely amazing. If you take the young leaves of a peach tree and you, how do you call this movement? You rub it between your fingers, and then you smell your fingers. Pure almond. There's also benzaldehyde in those leaves, so you can also use those leaves in beer. But you should not crush them. If you crush them, you release all the cyanide. Oh. And that's why if you, for example, have peach trees and in the same field you put horses, if horses start eating it, so they crush the leaves, horses can instantly die from it.
Wow.
And a horse is a big animal.
Right.
And it just takes a few peach leaves to kill a horse.
Huh.
So you have to be careful especially if you go into those territories where you are like, let's not just include the pits of the beer in the beer, the bits of the fruit in the beer, but let's only use the pits.
Right.
You have to be careful in things sometimes and try to not kill yourself in the process.
Sure. So after something like peach, as you're macerating beer, mastering these peaches in beer. Do you employ any processes to improve the quality of the extraction or of the use, the way that fruit expresses in the beer? Or these are just going into casks at normal cellar temperature for a specific amount of time?
No, there's no one answer I can give to the question because there's a million parameters. Because also the question is, of course, you have a fruit harvest coming in. Literally all I measure, and I don't even sometimes know why. All I can measure is the sugar level of the fruit. And then, but the most important, the truth is in your mouth, like on your tongue, like you taste the fruit. So you start squeezing those peaches into a tank, so it gets a bit homogenized, because you have some riper ones, some unripe ones, a bit of everything. That also matters. Sometimes I intentionally get a tiny little bit of early harvest if I want the slightly higher acidity, because the more ripe a fruit is, the higher sugar concentration, the lower the acid concentration gets. So you can also already play with that, with like your frame of when you harvest.
Yeah.
Because if you have only a late harvest, if you make a wine, for example, with that, it's going to be extremely boring because it's extremely high in sugar. So you got a lot of alcohol production, but very low acidity. And you need acidity because it's a carrier of flavor in wine. And also in Lambic, of course, because Lambic is not a sour beer, but Lambic is a wheat beer of spontaneous fermentation, which includes a decent acidity. But there's like so many factors. But when the fruit comes in, you taste the fruit. And you also think about because sometimes I make a few different tanks with the vineyard peaches, and I can make 3 tanks that are completely different. because you think about like what am I going to blend it with later? I always think about, when do I want to drink that beer? Is it winter? Is it summer? Is it evening? Is it noon? Where are we sitting? What are we doing? In which circumstances do I want to drink that beer? Because that defines like the mouthfeel you go for, the character, the acidity, the type of acidity you get in your beer too. So there's like a million things.
That's really fascinating, though. You even think now, as you are working with that fruit in the beer, what the end consumption experience and event might look like, and that informs.
That's what I'm trying to work towards, but
yeah,
it's not easy with Lambic because it's very unpredictable.
Sure,
but yeah, it's a spontaneous beer, which does definitely not mean that the beer makes itself, because it doesn't. Very often you have to. And they have wine, and they call it conventional wine, and they call it natural wine, and then they call it low intervention wine. And Lambic is a low intervention beer. If you make natural wine as a non-intervention wine, 95% of your harvest will be absolute crap, and you won't drink the wine. Okay, you always have to, which doesn't mean you have to cheat or add this or that. No, you have to work with what you have. If you have that fruit coming in the vineyard peaches, I just told you their shelf life is 1 day. So I better make sure that the fermentation starts within 1 day. Otherwise, the fruit is sitting and rotting in the tank, just getting brown on the spot. So I have to make sure that I have an already fermenting beer ready, just to kickstart that little bit of fermentation. So I just take a little bit of some other fruit, whatever we have fruit, that I can get a week before. And I just put that into a little, like 10 liter, like 2-3 gallon small tank of beer that already starts, that the fire is there, and then you dump that fire right into your vineyard peaches, and those things are fermenting within a few hours. And if you have to just pump beer on it of 1 year old and then wait for that fermentation to happen, then you're running behind, then you're too late, and you're going to lose. So it's about the right timing and working in the right way, because I promise I never ever used yeast in any single beer, but I have to sometimes work with little tricks here and there. Take a different beer or a different batch, or you're a blender at the end of the day.
Sure.
That's the beauty of blending, is that you have to use everything at the right moment and in the right quantity.
Well, at that point, you're a brewer and you're fermenting, and you're simply using beer that has got a stronger culture that'll ferment faster in order to to do its thing. Right? That's not an uncommon practice to use in the world of brewing. So,
no, but it's very much frowned upon sometimes in the Lambic world, because Lambic is that spontaneous non-intervention beer, and I'm telling you, it's not going to end well if you're sitting back and relaxing and doing jack shit. You're not going to make good beer. You have to be there.
I'm curious about this. What's the difference in flavor between, say, if you just let it slowly do whatever and kick off fermentation whenever, versus making sure that there's some vigorous re-fermentation happening quickly?
If fermentation takes too long to kick in, you get oxidation of your fruit.
Yeah,
which means that you lose the freshness. Definitely lose the freshness. Beer becomes old. Beer becomes boring. Beer becomes heavy to drink. And you can compensate by adding a more acidic Lambic to give it back a higher acidity, to pretend it's fresh again. It's not the same thing, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Certain aspects in your fruit, if they oxidize, I should actually, because I was also thinking about that, I should start making bad beer too, like really bad beer. No, but I'm not kidding. Like for tastings, for educational tastings, that I use a crop of fruit, that I make beer in the way I make it, and that I make 5 gallons on the side with the same beer and the same fruit, but in a different way, just to show that how much you can fuck it up. Because some people also think that being a blender is very easy. Being a blender is basically pouring things together. If it was that easy, everyone would do it.
Sure.
And I wouldn't be working that much.
Yeah. Well,
so
that's always been the experience when I've tasted your beer, that there is that vibrancy and that kind of energy, and that's what I'm curious to get at. That's an interesting one, focusing on that kind of component to make sure that you've got active fermentation that's scattering oxygen right as you put that in there, and you throw that kind of sugar into anything that's got live yeast in it, it's probably going to should start fermenting. But even if it doesn't move as fast, that's interesting that you might just give it a little boost that it needs to keep moving.
Of course, you need to be ready. I mean, when you go to a war, you better make sure your gun is loaded. If it's not loaded, you're fucked.
Sure.
It's the same if you want to make fruit beer, you have to be right there. If you want to, so you're harvesting. Because the thing is also, I don't use frozen fruit. And frozen fruit is a whole, I can talk for 5 more hours about frozen fruit. Frozen fruit is mostly mechanically harvested in very big, huge industrial farms, completely full of pesticides. It's fucking amazing. It's cheap. That's the best thing about it. But frozen fruits are usually everything that's mechanically harvested has usually not reached full ripeness, because if a fruit is fully ripe, it tends to get soft and it's fragile. And a peach, for example, if you get a very overripe peach, and well, no, peaches are not mechanically harvested; they're too big. Anyway, let's take raspberries, for example. You have overripe raspberries, and you start mechanically harvesting now. You just shake it into pieces. It becomes like blubber instantly, and that blubber oxidizes immediately. So for frozen fruit, they're usually a bit underripe, so they're still very stiff, and their transportability is high, and you can move that fruit several times and throw it over from bucket to bucket and conveyor belts and shit. But that fruit has never reached ripeness. The fruit has higher acidity too, but it never reached the full potential, never developed. The frozen fruit, you do not have that vibrancy you're talking about, that freshness that I get in my fruit. So the point I was getting to is that I get only fresh fruit. Sometimes, like last year when I was sick, we had to put it in the freezer. Simple as that. But it's not frozen fruit. It's my fruit that goes into a freezer. Sure, it doesn't come from God knows where. Nobody even knows. But that fruit is harvested. So I always talk to the farmers too. Like, when do we harvest this fruit? Because I want most of the harvest will be a very late harvest, because you get that full development of the aromas, the flavors, and it's like another interesting example is actually. So raspberries, once you pick a raspberry, the flavor is set. That's it. The raspberry doesn't change. It starts decaying. It starts getting rotten at some point. It's very different with stone fruits. Let's take an example. Peaches or apricots. Peaches. Peaches are a climacteric fruit, which means that if you pick a peach from the tree, it will continue ripening, because the stone inside the peach produces... what's the gas again? It's just a banana gas, they call it. They ripen bananas with that gas. So the pit of the fruit, it's a stress hormone of the fruit. It starts producing ethylene gas. And the ethylene gas will ripen the fruit, actually. Even when it's picked already, it will keep ripening. And that's how, for example, we can basically only get Spanish and Italian peaches in Belgium, because it's much cheaper to produce them there. They pick them a week too early. A week before they're ripe, they pick them. They're very hard and everything. You can kill someone throwing it at your head. But in the truck, it's very...
They ship really well because there's
transportability is extreme. The shelf life is amazing. It's perfect fruit. And by the time it gets here and is sitting here on the shelf, it ripens. And it is a ripe peach. But I will tell you, it never tastes like you let the same peach hang on the tree for a whole more week, because the fruit keeps getting the nutrients from the trees, and the fruit will definitely produce a better aroma and taste. If you would be in Spain and you buy a Belgian peach, shit. If you're in Spain, you have to buy Spanish peaches, because there they harvest them at peak ripeness, because they sell them immediately, people eat them immediately. So there's nothing wrong with a Spanish peach as long as you consume it in Spain. Right. That's why I like having Belgian peaches, because we can exactly time the harvest date, and I just go into the field and I taste one more day, and then you're playing like on the edge, because sometimes fruit is like, oh man, it becomes so, peaches, they become so sensitive, especially those vineyard peaches, man. If you let them hang for a day, they start rotting on the tree if you let them hang too long. But you want to capture that one moment when the fruit is at peak ripeness. And the acidity is usually very low and high sugars, but old varieties don't develop the high sugars as the modern varieties do. The low acidity is not a problem, because I work with Lambic.
Sure, you can bring your own acidity to it and decide how much.
That's why, for example, the Trog, which is the Trog Lambic, is one of those Lambics that's, an average Lambic geek. He doesn't get excited about anything the Trog. I swear it's one of the most beautiful lambics. So what they're put in bottles, that's one thing. I'm usually not a fan of that too. They make that whole sweetened line, which has their place in the market. I respect it. It's just that I don't drink the beer. But the lambic they make is absolutely amazing. It's very light, crisp, and it has a high acidity, and it develops that citric character, and citric acidity. which is something that in very overripe fruits, that citric acidity gets broken off in the fruit, like it's almost non-existent anymore. And that's the beautiful thing. But you need that acidity to carry all the flavor, so the fruit produces more flavor and aroma. But if you don't have the right acidity, it's a carrier of those flavors. And that's where the Trog, for example, comes in, where you can blend that lambic and bring that acidity back into the fruit. So you have high aroma, high taste, and a substantial acidity to drive the flavors and the aromas of the beer. And that's how you make a fucking beer, I'll tell you. But it's all about balance, of course. A beer should not get too acidic either. Sure. That's sometimes hard to balance with lambic, because lambic is a live beer, you know, it evolves, and there's those lactobacillus, beta-coccus, and God knows what other animals that we can't see anyway in there. So it's sometimes hard to balance it. That's the beauty. That's the challenge every time, to make a beer that is acidic, but not like aggressive. Like, I want to drink a beer, but not book a dentist appointment for tomorrow.
Sure.
There's another component of the character of the beers you're making here that I want to ask about. And when we got here to the blendery, you were cooking something in a brew pot that looked like thick brown soup, and we asked about it, and I think we were very surprised by your answer, not just about what you were doing, but why you were doing it. And if you could explain that, and then maybe talk about the importance of texture, would be really interesting.
Yeah. So the thing I'm cooking up there is it's an experiment, but it's like I did it on a smaller scale, because this is a really small scale still. It's like 4 gallons in that bucket. But it's basically when recently we had to empty a whole bunch of barrels, and in every barrel there's about 1 gallon of sediment, of yeast, dead yeast, and sediment, and just like crap sitting in there. So we collected all the sediment from all the barrels. First I emptied the barrels with the pump, but my pump only picks up the beer from like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So we leave the sediment behind in the barrel. And then before cleaning the barrels, we actually dump them upside down into a tank, and all that thick sediment from every barrel, we collected it. So there's mostly dead yeast in it. And right now what I'm cooking up in that pot is that you take that dead yeast and you heat it up to 50 degrees.
50 degrees Celsius.
120 Fahrenheit, and you get... So I took all the sediment from those barrels of lambic, which is mostly dead yeast, and I don't know what else in there. The thickest part of that sediment, actually, I use as a body lotion, literally, because it's full of vitamin B, and there are certain components, like, especially in winter, when we're outside and cleaning barrels, and when we're bottling and you're washing a lot of water, your hands, they're not particularly soft, and that thickest part of the yeast sediment, I don't know what's in there, but you put it in, and it's an old thing that winemakers used to do as well. You put it on your skin, it literally disappears into your skin. It nurtures your skin like crazy. It's better than anything you buy in a supermarket, because it's full of synthetic shit. Works in a similar way, but back in the days, people had yeast sediment. That was basically body lotion, because it nurtures the skin. So the thickest part I just use as body lotion in the winter. And the other part, right now I'm boiling it. Well, not boiling, I'm heating it to 50 Celsius. It's around about 122 degrees Fahrenheit. At that point, you get an enzymatic reaction, and basically the yeast cell will disintegrate. So the cell wall of the yeast will pop open, and it releases everything that's in there. Basically, in exactly the same way, bouillon cubes are made, so like stock cubes for making soup and dishes, because they have yeast extract, and what's inside that yeast cell. I have to look at that scientific paper again, because I'm not too scientific. There's a lot of stuff in there, but there's also glutamate in it, which might make you think about MSG. And MSG is that thing that gives umami flavors to food. And those similar things are in yeast cells too. And when you extract the yeast cell, so when you pop it open, basically, you get access to that flavor and that content of that yeast cell. And it just gives that meaty, brothy, creamy flavor. So I'm first doing the autolysis of the yeast cell, and then
forced autolysis. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then you heat it at the end, and then at some point later tonight, I'm going to heat it to 90 degrees Celsius, so the enzymatic reaction stops, and then it goes back into a barrel, and then it needs a lot of time. I'll tell you that thing is not ready in a few days or a few months. It needs a lot of time, but then I can shake that broth I basically make, which is 100% beer. It's 100% whatever came out of my barrels. Nothing is added. I just changed it. There's a certain process I used, which I borrowed from some. I didn't invent it. But I think it's very interesting to work with. And that's how I make a beer. Like in 2000, I'm going to get a bottle of that later. The Winter Goose 2017 was made in that process. That was the first time, but not in how I'm heating it now, because that's going to make it so much better. But the Winter Goose also has, it's just like creamy, rich, smooth. Like it's a goose, like, I don't know if it's better than any other goose, but it's so different, and it's so... Winter Goose, really, that thing breathes winter, low acidity, and it's so rich. Like it has the richness that you can almost eat it with a spoon. Like it feels so thick. It's really good.
So you're literally adding your sort of home harvested yeast bouillon to add a meaty, savory quality in some like controlled amount to your barrel.
Yeah.
To get this like and you mentioned mouthfeel. It affects mouthfeel as well. It's
creamy.
Yeah.
It makes it so creamy. Yeah, it makes it. Yeah, I'll explain it. I'll get a bottle later. But the thing is also like the beer, right there in that warehouse right now. It's 14 Celsius, which is around about 55, 60 Fahrenheit. It's actually too cold to drink that beer. That beer needs to be drunk at proper room temperature, like at least 16, 18, 20 Celsius, like properly warm. Then it becomes so... It's like, if you drink that beer, you ate and you drank at the same time. It's like a complete meal.
How do you then go, take this slurry that you've heated, and then, what's the next piece of the process? Are you pushing that back into some other fermenting or finished beer that's in a barrel? Are you diluting that down that you then use as a blending stock, or do you pre-measure and know how much you might add into something that's developing in some other? How do you go about using it?
Right now I'm going to make about 10 gallons of that stuff. It's not much. I'm going to add it to one barrel. But whether it's 5 gallons or 10 or 15 or 20 gallons, I add it to one barrel. I'm just making one barrel.
All of it goes into one barrel.
And if it's too concentrated at the end, it's no problem, because I have more stock.
Yeah.
You can never for such beers. It's despite the fact that I already made the beer 4 years ago, I can still not predict where it's going to. So I'd rather make it a bit too intense. So later on down the road, I can blend it down and blend it into balance, because it shouldn't get too creamy either. If it starts tasting like meat, then you can go a bit too far.
Sure.
It has to have that umami flavor and that richness, but it doesn't. You can go too far as well. It still has to be balanced in a way. Of course, there's a concept and it will have that taste, but it shouldn't be too much either. So I'll just make one barrel with this. After I heat it to 90 Celsius, so I'll bring it almost to boil, so all the enzymatic reaction stops. And normally, if you want to make a bouillon, then you, like in those factories where they make yeast extracts and stuff, they centrifuge it, and then they have like a spray, evaporate. I don't have that stuff, so I can only add the whole thing back to a barrel. So it includes the cell walls of the yeast, basically the dead ones, but I have no way to separate them out. And so far, I didn't detect any off flavors from it. But the beer is just, it's a fun beer, because actually that part of the whole process literally is trash. Everyone pours it away. Everyone just dumps it. Everyone either dumps it, or with the barrel washer it goes out anyway. And it's in the same way. That's almost 3 years ago we made that experiment. So you've probably seen barrels of Lambic fermenting. So if you make like most other beer, they put in steel tanks or even in barrels or whatever. But people always leave headspace in a tank for the beer to rise, for the foam and everything. But you've seen that every barrel of Lambic that ever ferments, its foam is coming out. It's for a good reason, because we use old hops in boiling Lambic because we don't want the bitterness, but it still has bitterness. So even very old hop still has a little bit of bitterness. But we fill the barrel so it's wort all the way to the top, so the foam escapes the barrel, because in that foam, that's where all the bitterness of the beer is. So it's a way to get rid of the bitterness of the beer. If you ever taste, you can taste it later, because some barrels were foaming over there. It's so bitter. Like you taste it an hour later, I call it Lambic cookies, because there's a thick foam and then it dries up and then you can pick it up like a cookie.
Yeah.
It's like, it has the consistency of a sticky marshmallow, basically, but it's pure bitterness.
Interesting.
So in that way, you get rid of the bitterness of beer. Oh, I forgot the question again.
So you
So that part is also considered trash. So people, for example, I think the first one who started that was Pierre Tilquin. He puts like plastic tubes on his barrels, so his barrels stay clean. So not all the foam goes over the barrels and becomes a sticky mess. So Pierre Tilquin puts a tube on it, goes to the front of the barrel. He puts buckets there, and the foam goes into the bucket, and he throws away the foam, so he keeps it clean and tidy. Okay. So what we did a few years ago. It's almost 3 years ago. Actually, I can't believe it. Time flies. But then again, COVID happened. So what I did, and the year before, of course, I did a few tests with it. But 3 years ago, I captured all of that foam. And every day, because if you let it sit in those buckets for too long, it's like full of fruit flies and bugs and shit. So yeah, you have to keep it clean. So every day I emptied the buckets into a tank. And throughout the whole season, I realized and that foam, of course, the foam of a beer, it's the same as you pour a beer in a glass. Foam will reduce to liquid again, of course. Same with that foam coming out of Lambic barrels, it reduces to a liquid. That's extremely bitter. It's not a good beer, I'll tell you that. But anyway, I collected all the foam every day. We poured it into a tank, and the tank would close and put an airlock on it so no bugs could get inside. So I captured all the foam from all the barrels that came in here, and sometimes you lose 2.5, 3, 4 gallons per barrel. When the beer is fermenting like crazy, there's so much foam coming out of it. So you have a massive loss from the start. At some point, of course, you'll start topping it up before the pellicle evolves. That's a whole different story. But anyway, we caught all that foam. We put it in a tank. At the end of the season, we literally had a full tote, 1,000 liters, 280, 300 gallons of, I don't know what to call it.
Sure.
Bitter soup. But and then we took that thing and we distilled it. And holy crap, it's good. Huh. You can't believe it. Because there's still 6% of alcohol. And of course, when it's very young, it's like 0.1 or 1% alcohol. But I put it in a tote and I let it ferment until the first fermentation was done. And we got it to about 5.8, almost 6%. And then we distilled that. Because I was like, I have no idea. It doesn't taste very good, that's for sure. But if we distill it, and the guy I'm working with, it's just like one street further than here. He says I distill a lot of bitter. He does a lot of experimental stuff too. He said, and bitterness in general, he says, that doesn't go into the distillate. Right. So we distilled that thing. And it's just crazy good. So we're making a whiskey out of that. Nice. And that's also trash. But hey, so the first thing we talked about is the last step in the process. Is when your beer is finished and you have all the sediment and you're bottling your beer basically. And what I just told is the first step in the process. But basically, let's try to. And the thing is also like we did that distillation and everything. If it turned into shit, good, we throw it away. That's it, okay? Because I do a lot of things too. I'm talking about the things here that do work and where I could make sense of what I'm doing, and in terms of using as much as possible of your resources. But it can just as well I did way more things that turned into absolute shit. I just dump and forget about it. It makes a good story sometimes, but sure, it has to make a good. That's all. I mean, we can talk about that for hours too. Making a product that's different, everyone can do that. Everyone can piss in a bottle. There's no problem. But making a product that's different and also very tasty, and not just unique, but also something new, something refreshing. That's something all different. That's what I'm aiming for, of course. And
as you're using this blending process, and you've got this barrel of blending stock with this umami character into it, like in a typical blend, how much of a finished blend might you work something like that into? I mean, it's not going to be 50-50 with another barrel, right? That would just throw things off in a weird direction. Is it one out of 4 barrels in a blend? Is it one out of,
I don't know. The only, regarding production beers, the only reference I have so far is that Winter Goose. And that was a barrel with that sediment thing. A rect of 170 liters out of a 230 liter barrel. So there was still a lot of slush in it. But at some point you have to bottle clear beer, of course, not the slush. And then I blended that almost barrel was with a barrel of a port wine barrel. But it was like the second use of a port wine barrel, so the port character was not that obvious anymore, but it still brought that nuttiness you get from port and nutty oxidation flavor that went so well with the umami meaty flavor you had from the other barrel. So, and then that thing was a 2-barrel blend. Back then, so it was a total of 400 liters of beer we bottled. It's 100 gallons of beer. It's nothing. But that's the scale I work at. And
sure.
I felt bad about that for a long time that I make beer and such, because there's more demand than that, of course. But I feel comfortable doing that, and in the way I work and the amount of work it involves and everything, it's enough for me. So it's a whole different discussion anyway. But that blend was a port barrel and a barrel of that umami
Interesting. That's a more significant piece of the blend than I would have otherwise guessed. But very cool. Let's keep on the we're getting on in time here, and we should wrap up soon. But I do want to stick on the mouthfeel theme for a second. With the Piassel, that was one of our beers of the year in 2018. One of the things that struck me in this pale vineyard peach fruit beer was the texture of that beer. That it had a silkiness to it that I described even back then as almost Cabernet Sauvignon-like. I mean, it felt luxurious from a textural capacity in a way that we don't normally taste in a pale or blonde, sour or acidic, acid-forward beer and something like that. Talk to me a little bit about how you structure and think about mouthfeel even in those very light, fruit-forward beers.
Yeah, well, it's very important. I mean, structure and mouthfeel is something that's very important. A lot of brewers don't even think about, but I think it's very important, especially in a Lambic beer. Also because I only make Lambic, but for example, in that beer, the 2017 harvest was a very difficult year. It was not so much harvest, and the fruit was rather acidic. The sugar levels were also fine, but there was definitely a pronounced acidity in the beer. So then you have to start thinking about how am I going to make it a bit smoother, and how am I going to give it a good mouthfeel, because usually when a fruit has a high acidity, it's very difficult to bring body into the beer. So you have to get it somewhere else. It's not going to come from the fruit. It's not going to be any magical thing happening to the fruit. So then it's all about selecting the right Lambic from the right barrel. And that happened in that 17. So that acidity of the fruit was fairly high. It was a 3-barrel blend basically, and 2 barrels were American oak, and it's literally the American oak that made that beer because and there was actually those 2 barrels. So there was one Pinot Noir barrel from Burgundy that was French oak, but also it was the first use of that barrel, and then the other barrel was first use of all of those barrels. So first use of one barrel of Pinot Noir from Burgundy, which in general makes a very rich, smooth beer, depending on where I source the barrels from, but. If I remember correctly, those came from Gevrey-Chambertin, which is a village, and make absolutely spectacular wines there, and they give a lot of body. Like those barrels actually give body to your Lambic, and then the 2 American ones, they give that. The French oak and American oak is vastly different. Like it's a different species of wood basically, and the flavors too. In American oak, more of that vanilla touch and more pronounced and different spiciness than French oak. As smoothness, like a good bourbon comes from a very good fucking barrel, because bourbon is very harsh and a very good barrel makes it very smooth. So that's why they char the fuck out of those barrels. So they give that vanilla note and then the rich, the smoothness of the spiciness and everything. And that's in that beer, for example. That's why I selected those barrels, because I tasted the fruit and I'm like, very good fruit. The quality of fruit was excellent, but it was a bit acidic. It didn't get the full ripeness that year. Well, it got to full ripeness, but at some point the ripening process just stops if you don't have enough sun. That's a whole different story. But that's how we are always. That's how you have to be there. You have to be present. It's like you have to look at what's the weather doing, how's the fruit, do we have any damage in the orchard, and how much is the damage, and how is it going to change the ripening of the fruit? Because if you have frost damage on part of your orchard, then the whole development cycle of the fruit will change. You have to be there all the time, and you have to talk to. And I don't do all of those things. I personally do not own any land. But I work a lot of lands, and I work together with people who know their lands and I'm learning so much from them. So it's all of those factors you have to combine. Like that harvest that has certain quality, you have to deal with that. How am I gonna make the best beer I can out of that? And that's how I made it. Like Peach Piassel 17, that's how I made a beer that was initially gonna turn out into a low body, very sour, but still very aromatic quality was good at that beer. That's how I actually tried to turn it into a soft, smooth thing. Still had high acidity, but it was very, very fucking well covered by a good barrel. That's the challenge. I fucking love my work. So I have to be back at work seriously again. And I'm the happiest guy in the world. If I can make beer, I'm happy. I told you last week I was a few days at the hospital. I told the doctor I have to go home, man. I gotta make beer. So, at some point in life, you have to realize that there's more important things than beer in your life. So, yeah, let's think. My health. Yep, that's about it. I think I'm going home now. I'm sorry. It just makes you happy. And then I just got home, and then I still have a little inflammation. No big deal. And a few friends called me and they said, "Oh, what the fuck's happening again?" I said, "Yeah, it's same as last year, but very different, much lighter version. But I need some help." And the next day, those guys, like, holy shit, people help so much. Because they want to see me do my thing,
Right.
and there's a lot of physical work, which, because of literally physical reasons, I cannot do right now. And then it's so nice to see that there's people tell us exactly what we have to do. It's humbling. It's very humbling, too. I'm happy. If I can make beer, I'm so happy, man. If I cannot make beer, I'll fucking die. I'll get inflammations through my whole body until I explode. So... Yeah.
Well, we can certainly hear the enthusiasm and can, and get this sense for just how impactful that last year has been on you and dealing with that and taking you away from this thing that you love. And it's exciting to see you back into it again. And, as someone who's been enjoying tasting your beer for years now, you can taste the excitement. You can taste that spark and that spirit in it and that kind of, a finely tuned palette that is trying to find the most expressive piece out of it. And it was, absolutely terrible to think that physical limitations and that this kind of, your body might be holding you away from that. And it's fantastic to think that you may be turning a corner on that, at least through, medication that can help you, keep the symptoms down and keep doing what you love.
Well, that's step number 1. Step number 2 is completely get rid of this thing.
Sure,
it's all in the food. It's all in the food. We have to think what we're doing. We're talking about beer. I'm going to talk about for a maximum 1 minute, but food is everything. Eat fucking healthy food. Think about what you put in your body.
Well, like I said, I can hear and feel the kind of passion that you bring to this and the kind of creativity that expresses itself in the bottles of the beer that you make is, has not just been recognized by us, but by many beer drinkers and fellow brewers who also deeply respect what you do, including those that like Girardin, that who help you source those things. It's beautiful to see that kind of well-formed relationships, and it's amazing to see that kind of that love from your peers that also want to see you be successful in that. I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. Vireman Iceria shows malty sweet flavor and a soft biscuit-like aroma. Experience consistent and reliable supply with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Get detailed insight into your fermentations with Brew Monitor risk-free. Put SS Brewtex Advances to work in your brew house. And the Mettler Toledo InPro 8630i is your perfect helping hand. If you enjoy this podcast every week, please support us. Go to beerandbrewing.com, click that subscribe button, read fantastic stories like those that managing editor Joe Stang writes on the regular. Joe, thanks for joining me and co-hosting this podcast. Raf, it's been really incredible to talk to you about this, and I can't tell you how happy we are that you are on the up and up and moving on the mend and back in the brew house and back doing what you love. If people want to learn more about De Bokke, where do they find you?
That's a good question.
You can't.
How did you find me? That's the question. If you tell them how you find me, then they know the answer.
It's a secret.
No, it's not a secret. I don't know, man. I'm at some point. I mean, we were sitting here in the warehouse I actually bought last year, and I plan to make in this space. I plan to make a little, not a tasting room because we can legally not do that, but I'll make a little event space in here. And I hope to actually sometimes host little events or private tastings for people or something. But for now, there's a list on the website. I don't know if the website's still up or not. There's a website which never gets updated, so there's a list of bars and restaurants on there where you can get a beer. There's an Instagram page which I haven't opened in more than a year, which you can check for updates. I don't know, man. I'm not too much into social media. There's a list on the website, Bokke. There's a list of bars and restaurants. That is pretty much up to date still, because not much has changed in the last year.
Right. They probably don't have a lot of stock, if they have any at all, but be patient because
almost all out. But next summer, I hope. I mean, we're bottling now, and then I have some. I actually have some gooses in the bottle that were bottled 2.5 years ago already. I'm gonna get one of those. I was just looking up where to find the bottle after drinking that beer. Some of these are fucking crazy good, because gooses need time in the bottle.
Right.
Gooses are let them sit for 5 years, actually. There should be a fucking law that every goose has to sit in a bottle for 5 years before you can release it. Pretty much similar to champagne. Because if you make a goose really well, it just gets so much better in the bottle. So there's some exciting stuff coming up. And I hope, we're bottling the fruit beers now. And I hope by next summer, there will be more beer available, and then it will be available through those partners I work with, bars and restaurants. And probably for the US, for sure, 100% for sure, some is going to the East Coast, to the Chicos. It's like this Italian dude in New York, and he runs like a supermarket, but he has a big fucking beer menu. He has like a very good retail space for getting beer. Right. Yeah, you heard about it probably.
Oh, for sure. I saw you did some of those releases.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for doing that. I really can't wait to go back to the. I haven't been to the US in 2 years now. I mean, I gotta go see, because that place just gets fucking crazier every time I go there. I don't. No, it's been 2 years. I just want to see it. Beautiful. I love the country, man.
Hey, that makes two of us.
Exactly. It's fascinating.
Well, Raf, thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's been really fun. Cheers.
Thank you so much for coming out here.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so
for
much
you to have
guys.
us here.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.